Hello, third year. This is the second part of the scattergraphs video. You will need this part to answer question one though, so apologies that part A and part B are a little bit back to front. This question we're going to focus on how to draw a scattergraph, which is something you've possibly done before, but we're going to cover it again. If you've done it before and done it in science, that's great. I'm sure you'll find this pretty straightforward this week. Here's the question in front of us. We're only going to do parts A and B, which is why part C is blacked out. Okay, so we're only going to do parts A and B. So first things first, we need to have a wee read through the question, see what we think is going on here. So Mr. Ives is recording the number of times that 11 National 5 pupils have come to lunchtime help in the run up to their maths exam, and then he's also then listed their actual score. So essentially, it sounds like Mr. Ives is interested in what impact is it having if pupils come to lunchtime support. Okay, so and there's our data there. So along the top we have the number of lunchtimes, and then along the bottom there we have the math scores. So that's going to be our sample data that we're going to put into a scatter graph. With your scatter graphs, you absolutely have to use a ruler, so please make sure you do that. It'll be much easier on squared paper. Okay, so if you've got your jotter, that's fine. If you need another jotter, you can actually get them from school reception. The other alternative would be if you've only got line paper, you might have to create your own squared paper by trying to draw vertical lines across the horizontal line, something like that. Okay, this is very, very difficult to do if you don't have that. Okay, you can try it on blank paper, but you'll have to be very, very precise. It's quite difficult. So this really is a squared paper exercise. First things first, we're going to need a couple of axes. Okay, so we're going to need an x-axis and a y-axis. Now, traditionally, when I do this, I tend to put the one with regular intervals. So the variable that has a regular interval tends to go on the x-axis. So if you look at this one goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's going up by 1 each time. So I would tend to put that along my x-axis. Okay, now to do that, I'm going to need to go from 0 to 12. So I'm not quite a centimetre here. So I'm going to draw my line. I'm trying to use a ruler on the iPad, so apologies, this is not the easiest thing in the world to do, but I hope it works out okay. That's not too bad. I'm just going to clip that little piece here. Let's do that, that's better. And then we also need to do something on our y-axis, but let's just populate that. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now as I'm doing these, please notice that these little lines are going on the blue guidelines on the page, okay? They do not go into the white boxes. When you're plotting scatter graphs, you have to plot the points on the intersections of the blue guidelines, okay? They do not go in the white boxes. They go on the guidelines, okay? So you have to find those precise points. Now, on the other axis, on the y-axis, I'm going to put my maths score, all right, now. So this data along here, and that looks like it ranges from 30 to 55, okay? Now, this axis starts from 0, and I have a couple of options. I can start my axis with my math score from 0, and that would make that 10, 20, so my first point would be here, which makes this wasted space. Okay, now there's something we can do to help that, which is we can jump and we could maybe start our graph on the 30 instead. So to do that, what you need to do is put a little squiggle, a sort of zigzag, right at the bottom of your axis. So if you just watch what I do here, you'll see what I mean. So we're going to start at 30 and we're going to go up to 55. So that's actually a relatively short axis. So I'm going to put in a little, that's not very good, try that again. That's not the best either. It's very hard, much easier to do. with paper. Oh, that's rubbish as well. I might zoom right in, maybe that'll make it easier. That makes it worse. Okay, so that sort of zigzag shape, that's not the best example. It's much easier to do on paper or in person on the board, something like that. That little wiggle means that you're jumping, and instead of starting at 0, I'm going to jump to 30. And then I'm going to do 35, 40, 45, 50, and then the top score is 55. Truthfully, I don't really need to, like, I could happily have started at 0 and just gone 10, 20, 30. This technique here works really well if you're having to jump from, say, 0 to some much bigger number like 200 or something like that. It's a good technique to use, okay? But I just wanted to show you that. You don't really need to use it in this question, but I wanted you to see it. Okay, next thing we need to do is start plotting the data points, okay? And we're going to do that using the crosses, and I'm going to use a different color, so let's just use that pink color. So first things first, our first data point here is 1 and 30. So I'm going to find what actually, before we start plotting points, let's just label our axis, shall we, just to make sure we get things right. So along the bottom axis here, this is lunch times. I would actually be inclined to call it lunch times attended. Yeah. And then along the y-axis is the maths exam score. You must label your axis when you do any kind of graph, really. The reason for that is because people need to know what they're looking at. If you don't put labels on your axis, if you don't put a title on your graph, you're not really presenting any information. You're really just drawing a nice picture. And actually, if you want your graph to have meaning, if you want it to persuade people of a certain argument, then you have to label it up. Okay, back to what I was saying previously. Let's plot these points. So the first 2 points, we've got 1 and 30. So let's find the number 1 on the lunchtime added and 30. There it is there. Now you'll notice that that cross is going on the intersection of the guidelines, like I said before. You've got 2 and 35. Then you've got 3 and 35. 4 and 40. 5 and 35. So we're back down here. 6 and we're up to 45 there. 7 and we jump to 55. There is no 8. 9 we're going to 50. 10 we're going to 50. 11 we're up to 55. And 12 we're up to 55. So if you look at those points, hopefully you can see a bit of a trend. Now the last thing we want to do with this graph is to put a title on it. So I'm going to say, I'm going to call this graph lunchtime support, and it's plotted against, so versus maths score. Okay, so lunchtime support and maths score. That's my 2 variables. All right, so that's the title of my graph. Let's just try and underline that as best we can. Okay. Right, so that's part A done. Okay, we've finished part A. Part B, part B says, can you see any correlation and describe it if there is one? So what you're looking at is your data. Does your data behave in any particular way? To me, in general, it looks like as we move from left to right, the data is increasing. We've got a kind of general upward trend going on there, haven't we? That suggests a positive correlation. So for part B, all you need to do really is say yes, and the answer is a positive correlation. And that's it for part B. Okay, so constructing the graph really is the important thing. Axes labels, make sure your points are on the intersections, make sure your axes are nice and clear, title as well, okay? And then the correlation you're looking for, is there one? There may not be, sometimes there isn't, but in this particular case, you've got a positive correlation, which is what you would expect. If you think of the logic, you would hope that if someone is studying more, is attending more study support classes, then their overall score would improve. That's what you would expect and hope to happen. Okay, so that's that question complete. That goes with the other part of the other video, and that should be enough for you to complete the worksheet. Okay, please feel free to ask me any questions if you need it. It's absolutely fine. There may be some late meetings and things. I might have to spend some time in school this week. I don't yet know. So if there's any delay in answering your question, that's probably why. But I will try and answer your questions as quickly as possible. Okay.